Welcome to Restaurant Relevance, the podcast, where the goal is to glean operational tactics for restaurant operators from data-driven research, probably nerding out along the way. I'm Nathan Jarvis, the host. Welcome to those of you who are tuning in. Before we dive into the show, here are the highlights and key takeaways. So I would need to find a way to choose a smell which is both pleasant and congruent with my brand. It doesn't seem like that would actually be that difficult or expensive to do. I feel like an operator could do that pretty easily, particularly if they were to work with a company that does these types of scents on a regular basis, and that you could actually put the scent in more than just the air, right? I mean, you could aromatize it kind of like Cinnabon or a place like that, but you also possibly could have it in the soap or in print advertising, etc. In today's episode, we're featuring research published in the International Journal of Contemporary Hospitality Management entitled Scent Marketing, Linking Scent Congruence with Brand Image. So this research is super exciting to me. I've always been interested in smell, having formerly been a cook and playing with flavor. And I'm excited to see how this research could actually be executed in an operation in a totally achievable way. It's fascinating to me to see how important the right scent is, and that it could be very easy to actually find the right one for your operation. So I want to go ahead and jump right in. We're fortunate to have one of the authors with us today, Dr. Anil Bilgihan, on the show. He is an associate professor at Florida Atlantic University's College of Business. His research interests include user experience, digital marketing, and online social interactions, and is also the associate editor of the journal Psychology and Marketing. He is the recipient of several awards, including the Cisco Extensive Research Award, the Warren Lloyd Holtzman Excellence in Research Award, and the Emerald Citations of Excellence Award. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Nathan.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you. So I want to start off always with a kind of a really big 30,000 foot view. In two sentences, would you explain to us what your study was about and what you found?
All right. First, I'd like to thank the other authors. I'd like to give credit for my friends in France. They're teaching at the University of Angers and Paris School of Business. And this research was also conducted by the help of an anti-cafe and Scentis, which is a scent marketing company. So in this research, we wanted to find out whether the scents, would they be associated with the brand image. Let's say, like, if you do have a 3-star Michelin restaurant, like, do consumers wanted to or expected to smell in a particular way, which might translate into their maybe spending, their visiting the restaurant again, or just simply spending more time at the restaurant. So that was the goal of the research in two sentences. So we find out that it's not enough to use a scent that actually smells good. It has to be congruent with other factors, like with the sensory environment, which we'll talk about. So that's just like the basic explanation of this research paper.
Interesting. So just having a nice scent isn't enough. It actually the smell has to line up with your concept.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. And so I understand the power of scent. I used to work in restaurants, and obviously aroma it plays a huge role in what we eat and the way people are impacted. But I never would have thought about it from a marketing perspective. Is this something that has been talked about in the literature for a long time, or is this relatively recent?
Well, sensory marketing had been discussed in the literature, like in products marketing, apart from services marketing, that they were introduced once they found out about the new car smells. Actually, it's something that excites people, right? Like, you buy a brand new car and it just like smells really pleasant. But actually that scent is like all the chemicals that they use in the factory and leather. So it's actually like kind of an unpleasant smell, but people associate it with like purchasing a new car and the feeling good economy works there, right? So actually once they figured out, they were trying to get rid of the new car smell because it's the chemicals. So once they got rid of it, and then people start complaining, they will say, well, this car does not smell like brand new.
Interesting.
So like people, like if you look from an evolutionary perspective, people had been really like the scents and smells had been really important for our behavior, right? Like for instance, for mating purposes, you smell the pheromones, and a lot of animals, they know which partner that they should go after just because of the scent. And also for the dangerous situations, just like fire, like mammals had been smelling, and if they need to escape, they escape. So smell is an important part. And this had been also applied in the sensory marketing, like quite recently for the services marketing.
Interesting. And so I know in your paper you mentioned both airports and hotel examples that have used scent marketing of some sort. And I've heard, this is a rumor to me, I don't have any proof, but that Cinnabon actually does this. Do you have any restaurant examples of companies that use scent marketing?
Yeah, I can give you a few examples, and let me also like talk about how this started in the restaurant industry as well.
Yeah, please. That'd be interesting.
Like the earlier research shows that in the grocery stores, like if you pump the bakery smell into the store, the sales actually increase, right? So if you are smelling like a freshly baked cookie, or like the bread, the sales actually increase. So restaurants also thought about it. Wait a minute, we also have products that actually smell good. What if we actually make people smell this, just like the example that you gave, like Cinnabon, right? Like you go to maybe a mall, and it's just like it's a very distinct smell. You might actually never eat a Cinnabon, but that might be the one that it just like sends an image, right? It's like, oh, I just want a Cinnabon. So coffee shops do that, right? Like they are actually pumping the coffee smell outside, so that's also a pleasant smell for the coffee lovers. So even if they were not thinking at that exact moment of purchasing a coffee, if they're passing by and if they smell it, and they might just want to go in and buy a coffee. I'll give an example without giving a brand name here of one of the hotels that we work here in South Florida. It's a big resort, and they have like different restaurants inside. And let's say if their ice cream parlor, like they have a beach front, and if the food traffic is not high enough for the ice cream parlor, if their sales had been dropping, they just pump up that cone smell so that people actually go and buy ice cream.
Wow. So it's almost an interesting variation of revenue management for retail outlets, where if the sales aren't high enough, you actually increase the smell to try to drive more sales.
Yeah, absolutely. And it works for, a lot of people. Disney actually had been doing that. Disney is a great company for sensory marketing. But, you might just get out of the ride, and all of a sudden it just smells like maybe a popcorn or whatever scent that they're just putting after that ride. And you might go and just like grab some food in the counters that they are selling.
Interesting. Yeah, and I guess as we're talking about it, I can think of instances where I've heard of realtors talk about baking cookies in the home that they're trying to show to try to, increase the prospective buyer's interest in the home. So I guess this makes intuitive sense. All right. So, but as you said at the beginning, it's not just having a pleasant smell. It's a smell that aligns with the brand. And that's where the title of your article, Congruence, comes in. So why is that important? I mean, if it smells nice, why wouldn't just smelling nice be enough?
So one of the theories that we used in this paper was actually looking into how people actually want things to be, what will be the best way to put it? Like they don't want contradictions how they see the world, right? Okay. And this is the theory of cognitive balance. So this had been used in political science. This had been used in investing. So, but what happens basically is that people do not want surprises, pretty much. Like if they have a view that they believe in, and they just like buy the whole package, right? So if there is a brand that they associate with certain brand image, they expect all of it to be associated like similar way. So
Okay.
let's say like if you are a spa, for instance, and it's expected that it has like some relaxation, right, associated with the relaxation. So the smells like eucalyptus or like lavender are relaxing scents. So people expect it to smell it that way. Maybe not as peppery or maybe not as citrusy. So we associate different scents with different images.
So even if it smells nice, it still needs to be consistent with what the brand idea, the brand image is in the guest mind then.
Exactly. That brand image should be harmonious with what brand is, right? And this could be like the hotels have been doing this with their, soaps and shampoos. So you might say that, well, this smells like, for instance, Four Seasons. And they do it also with the fresh flowers, like that's also associated with, right? So you go to the lobby and I have like grad students. Sometimes we talk about those sensory marketing. They are sometimes fed up with sensory marketing. They say, I go back home and my wife tells me that I smell like the hotel, right? Because they're like having this like signature smells in the lobby. So, but people associate it like it just brings memories, right? Like, so if you associate the lobby of Hilton smell, anytime that you go in Hilton, it's just like it's harmonious and it's balanced. So people want that.
Interesting. And so in your paper, you say this kind of falls into the field of atmospherics. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly.
So is that the theory that you use to kind of frame this paper?
Yeah, that's one of the theories that we use. So people are, especially in the service context, the atmospherics is really important, right? So you as a chef, that you know that it's really important to have delicious meal that actually smells good, that tastes good, that has nice textures. But if you're sometimes serving this in an atmosphere that's not pleasant for the consumer, for the guest, they might not enjoy it as much, right? So you do it with the atmospherics. Basically, you do it with the light, right? Like sometimes people prefer dim light, not bright lights, and it's just like atmospherics is the sight, the things that we see in the restaurant. And this basically includes everything that's from the font of the menus, right? Just the sign, like the things that we see. And there is the things that we touch. It could be like your linen. People might just touch and feel it. Maybe your silverware, just like the feeling that you get it, touch is important. And the smell is usually like there hasn't been much research in smell, so that's why we looked into the smell. There's research about sound, right? If you want people to actually eat quickly, up-tempo music will basically make people to actually eat quicker. Whereas if you want to just put different types of music, people's perception will be different.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Awesome. So in a minute, we'll talk about what you actually did because I find that fascinating. But I want to start with, so in your experiments, you chose a number of variables you were going to look at. You looked at a guest's purchase intention, attitudes towards the scent, and in your real world example or experiment, you actually looked at a guest, how long a guest was in the establishment. You also looked at perceptions of service and product quality, as well as satisfaction. So why did you choose those variables to look at when you were trying to evaluate the value of scent?
So we did a focus group study first. We actually chose those variables, right? We looked into the literature first and we said, okay, what are the important things for these? The context was a cafe, right? And we just wanted to make sure what they wanted, the owners and operators. Obviously, they want people to visit. And once they're visiting, that they're just like spending and they just like perceive the quality to be high so that there is the word of mouth. So those are the things, and attitude towards the place, whether that they find it pleasant or welcoming. So this was based on the literature and a small like focus group interviews that we did with the owners and operators.
Okay. All right. And then from there, I think the first major part of your experiment was you chose a variety of different scents or smells, and then you tried to determine, well, were those smells congruent or not with a particular concept, in this case, a cafe. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. That's correct.
Okay. And so how did you choose those initial smells, and then how did you uh, determine what kind of tests did you use to determine if the smells were congruent? And what I'm getting at is, it sounds like this is something that an operator might actually be able to do, kind of on their own. And so I'm kind of curious what the process was like.
So we worked with the scientists, which was the company, right? They
Okay.
cooperated with us, and they already have some clients, and they already have like a pretty much a catalog, right? If you're a luxury hotel, these are the scents actually are associated. Will be like
Understood.
sandalwood, or the different scents actually trigger different emotions, just like
Right.
the way that the colors trigger different emotions, right? Like red makes people actually like more maybe aggressive, whereas like
Right.
green is more relaxing, and it's the exact same with the scents. And operators can just like have a look into what scents actually are associated with what type of feeling. So if you're a fast food restaurant, obviously the scent that you will use might be quite different than if you're a Michelin star restaurant, right?
Right.
So that's also different for a vegan restaurant versus
Oh,
like
yeah.
just a steakhouse. Obviously, your clients will not want to associate with that like meat smell. Whereas if
Right.
you're a Greek restaurant, maybe that they expect it to just like smell like maybe more fresh ingredients and lamb. But if you're a Basque region restaurant, the scents that people expect might be different. So um, it has to be just like aligned with your concept overall.
And so in your study, did you like have some sense and then you asked guests to rate them?
Yes,
Or okay.
we ask them to rate, and we ask whether this will fit with the concept. So in the study, if I remember correctly, it had been a while since we published it, and that sometimes you're so like immersed in the project, and after the
Yeah.
project is gone, and you just you have to look into certain things again. But we had those cafe concepts in France. Now they're just like for the younger crowd that they spend some time. They might be just bringing their laptops, that they work just like a coffee shop, right? They
Right.
might also play games. So there is different things, and we wanted to make sure that the scents that we were using will be associated with this type of like service place.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, that sounds like something that an operator, either through working with a company or on their own, could kind of guess at some possible sense that might be congruent with their operation, and then could actually bring in some guests and say, "Hey, can I give you a free cup of coffee or a free meal to come evaluate these things and give me your thoughts?"
Absolutely, yeah. Just
Okay.
it could be the smell of the once you look into the atmospherics. As some restaurants, they do have the open kitchens, and people actually like
Yeah.
to hear that like sound and excitement, and the seeing the flames and the smells. It's just like such a sensory experience where people go just maybe to actually have that experience. Where in some restaurants, people, if it's like a, let's say, restaurant that's geared towards the business travelers, for instance, it might be just like a business meeting for the lunch, power lunch, and all that. They don't want to maybe go back with their suit smelling like the restaurant, or it's just
Right.
like what you're trying to accomplish, what your concept is. You may do a little focus group study with your customers, and then you may launch your sensory experience. Because usually as a restaurant owner, you might think that, well, if my restaurant smells like detergent, for instance, I'm making an example,
Right.
it will associate the cleanliness, and so that's what people would want, right? But
Right.
it might not be the case. Maybe people actually want to smell um, just the grill, like the burger, right?
Right.
So it all depends. whereas some places that they just might want a pleasant, like more relaxing scent. So it's having a little focus group study is a good idea.
Okay. All right. So after the first part of your study where you kind of identified scents that were congruent or not, you actually did a field experiment. And before we talk about the actual field experiment, I just want you to talk about the concept. You did this in something called an anti-cafe. And actually, I'd never run across this concept before. And so I started doing some Googling, and there aren't very many in the United States. It looks like they're a little more popular in Europe. So can you give me, what's an overview of this idea of an anti-cafe? And then we'll talk about the experiment.
I mean, it's just like a place that, people might spend some time. It might be for work. They might just drink some coffee, have little snacks, spend the time, like meet with other people. It's like a co-working place, but not. So they might just rent. There are printers, so if they might want to print something, so it's really geared towards people who work from maybe home or they want to socialize. And it's also for people who want to play and socialize, not only for work. So they're going there to spend time, not only to eat and drink. Like it might be like, you might offer kombuchas or
Right.
coffee or just like little snacks. That's like that's a concept, that a place that people spend some time.
And they're, at least for what I found online, it seems like most of them, they're not charging for the snack or the food or the beverage. They're charging for the time that you spend there, which I found interesting. That's very different than most of our cafe concepts.
Yeah, that's a quite new concept, and we work with an anti-cafe for this.
Oh yeah. Awesome. All right. So after you identified some scents that were congruent or not congruent with this cafe concept, then you actually did a field experiment where you, I think, if I'm understanding it right, you actually had the two smells, two scents, one that you identified as congruent and one not, and you chose whether you released one or the other, and then you asked guests what they thought, basically.
So in the experiments, I think it was that they had the one scent that's congruent with the brand. After the first step that we found that people said that was congruent, right? So we were just like having those smells. I think some of them were the tomato wine smell, for instance, which was not associated. The other one was more like coffee-like smell, and like the biscuits and honey biscuit, that they had like names for different scents that they had. And they were also, some participants were having also no scent at all. So we were just like comparing, looking at, and there was statistically significant differences. The congruent smell, people stay longer. Their was heightened. They view the place as better. They perceive that the quality higher, and they're more satisfied.
All right, so they're going to stay longer, higher quality in their minds. Was there any association between the congruent smell and did they spend more money or time? I guess they spent time in this sense.
Time, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So
in a traditional cafe concept or a restaurant, you might be able to see like an association between more time and more money spent.
Absolutely. And like if you go to a coffee shop and if there is, this is from obviously not a scientific, just like an anecdotal evidence. Me as a coffee lover, like if I go to a place and if I'm just like working with my laptop, just answering some emails, and the places that they roast their own coffee that I get to smell it, I tend to drink a lot more coffee because it just like triggers something in my mind saying that, well, it's coffee time. Otherwise, I might be focused on my work, but it sends that signal, right? Like, so as I was mentioning, the scent is just such strong associations with our mood, with our, it just, the neurons are just like helping, just sending the signal to the brain, telling me to just grab more coffee, right? If it smells like cookies, I might not be even hungry, but I might just go grab grab
Right.
more, right?
Go grab a cookie or a muffin or something like that.
Yeah.
All right. So clearly, your study has demonstrated that in a food service context, in this case, a cafe, that scents are important and that the congruence of the scent with the brand image is important. What's next with regards to what do we need to know, or maybe you've continued the research in this area? Like, what's next to improve our understanding of this and to be able to use it better in an operation?
So I think that there might be some studies that look into different, maybe like themed restaurants out there, like sensory experience might differ,
Ah,
not based on the scent only, but just the holistic experience, right?
okay.
Like one example is that, you might have heard about these like dark restaurants. The one in Switzerland, like you cannot go there because it's always booked, and you just go there and there is no lights on, so it's completely dark, and the way that you actually smell and just like the food actually tastes different because your
Right.
experience is quite different, right? So there could be like some experiments with just making people actually to try to taste the food with some certain sense, right? We did not do
Right.
this in this study, but do they perceive the food to actually taste better, or it's going to make them to pay more, or it's going to make them to perceive the restaurant as better quality or not? Because they have been doing these, some restaurant brands, I'm not going to give names, but for frozen burger they just put chemicals to make the burger taste like actually grilled burger, right? But
Hmm.
it was just like frozen, so people actually cannot tell the difference. It's just engineered in a way that people like just taste that smoky flavor. And
Right.
they might do experiments whether people actually can tell the difference if they were just in an experiment eating like actually with artificial scent or like
Right.
the real thing. So these might be like the studies and looking into the general, the holistic servicescape experience, because there's not many studies have been conducted, let's say, with regards to the colors, right? We know that
Ah,
certain colors, for instance, open appetite, whereas
right.
certain colors, they like purple, for instance, it just like closes the appetite. You don't feel hungry. So if you're probably painting your restaurant in like purple notes, people won't eat much. But there is actually not many studies being conducted, like experimental designs, to see whether people will eat more or less.
Ah, okay. All right. So I always like to ask my researchers. So if you were running or owning a restaurant right now, based on this research, what would you do with it? Like, how would you use this data to make your restaurant better?
So, like nowadays that the restaurant industry is just going through such difficult times, and with especially, with the COVID situation, maybe people's perception towards smells even might have changed. Like as
Yeah.
in, if I see like a sanitizer, and if I actually smell if that like the sanitizer smell in the table, it actually makes me feel comfortable somehow
Interesting.
subconsciously. But it would not have been the case in the before the pandemic era. So
Right.
I suggest, if I was like now managing a restaurant, I will be using the scents for sure, especially if I was a, depending on what type of restaurants that I'm operating. But if I was a, um, for instance, cafe or a fast food restaurant or a quick service restaurant, I will definitely do like aroma billboards to lure people in. Like we'll just like put the
Yeah.
scent out there and just get some more traffic so that people will just grab. Not only they might not sit and dine, but they will just like grab it to go. And
Right.
I do the same. I will like also, since the scents are associated with brands, a lot of people are now ordering like Uber Eats and all that, like delivery. So just use also this as an opportunity for the sensory marketing, because there
Hmm.
is not much that you can show apart from your food. But just use those like hand napkins that are, just make them smell that is
Yeah.
unique to you, right? Like it might be a scent associated with you. So those will be the few things that I would consider doing in these days if I was managing a restaurant.
Interesting. I love your term or your idea there of a scent billboard, like, trying advertising, getting people on the sidewalk, so to speak, to come in. And I also really like the idea of in your, your to-go containers. It's almost like the old magazine scratch and sniff, advertisements. Like, is there some way that you could get your smell into the napkins or that sort of thing? That's fascinating. All right. So if besides those, so I would need to find a way to choose a smell which is both pleasant and congruent with my brand. It doesn't seem like that would actually be that difficult or expensive to do. I feel like an operator could do that pretty easily, particularly if they were to work with a company that does these types of scents on a regular basis, and that you could actually put the scent in more than just the air, right? I mean, you could aromatize it kind of like Cinnabon or a place like that, but you also possibly could have it in the soap or in print advertising, etc. As a recap. Okay, that makes sense. Awesome. Anything else you'd like to add about this study or what you're working on right now?
Well, there is not a follow-up study with this, so I would like to make a follow-up study, as I was mentioning, like with the sensory experiences. But it's just like I find the sensory marketing fascinating because of the way that humans have evolved. There is so many psychological explanations how people behave, why they behave, and the scent is an important one, and it could be used in restaurant marketing as well. So I like to let the operators know that just look into the other also atmospherics, like regarding the colors, regarding the font. Like there has been research that's been conducted, like handwritten menus, for instance. It works for some restaurants, right? Like it works for restaurants, whereas it doesn't work for others.
For others,
and typical fonts that they work for, certain type of restaurants. And it's just like experimenting, finding, maybe having focus groups and asking people how they perceive your restaurant, and just maybe working with marketers to get some insight on how to position your restaurant better. It might increase your sales. Your restaurant might be perceived better. Obviously, the food is your core product. That's extremely important. But there are other added values that you can do. Some people go to restaurants for not just for the food, but it's just to watch people or just to see something different. And you can do that with with some sensory marketing techniques.
Cool. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for spending the time to be on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. It was my pleasure.
This is fun to talk about. And thank you for listening to today's show. If you have questions or comments, please email me at nathan@restaurantrelevance.com. Ciao.